The Democratic Party is trying to pick up the pieces after their huge defeat in 2024. Veteran Democratic strategist James Carville and Gen Z Democratic influencer David Hogg have been in a public spat over the past couple of months in disagreement over where the party should go. The two faces, the old guard and the new, actually agreed to a debate to hash it out, and it got spicy. But first, let's talk James Carville. He was the face of the DNC for decades, the guy who made a name for himself as Bill Clinton's political guru. If you were an infant during the Clinton admin, like I was, allow me to explain exactly how Carville came into relevancy. James Carville is the mind behind the classic quote, "It's the economy, stupid," which he said ahead of Clinton's victory against incumbent George H.W. Bush. His tough, direct campaign style helped Clinton connect with voters, particularly working class Americans. Democrats were back in the White House for the first time since the Carter admin. Another sign of James Carville's time was his marriage to a Republican strategist. Maybe that was normal back then. Now, even dating across the aisle is virtually unheard of. And another thing, Carville publicly swore he'd never eat a salad, just to make sure we all knew he wasn't a liberal elite. Now, here we are in 2025, and the party he built, the one he helped steer for decades, has drastically changed. In today's Democratic Party, liberal women wouldn't be caught dead dating a Trump voter. A vegetarian diet is very, very welcome, and middle America is increasingly dismissed as flyover country. Still, mainstream media welcomes Carville's generational knowledge about Democratic politics and how to succeed in it, but to the David Hoggs, he feels out of touch. The old guard of the party wants to hold on to what worked for them in the past, the centrism, the safe bet, moderate policies. We know those common sense issues are winning ones because they're the ones Trump won on this election cycle. But let's face it, the DNC is not the party of Bill Clinton anymore, no matter how badly Carville wants it to be.
I'll tell you this, more deficit has accumulated under Donald Trump than the other president in American history, but I'm glad that you're on the fiscal responsibility bandwagon. I'm glad you're on the bandwagon of Bill Clinton being able to balance the budget and bring unbelievable prosperity to America. But, you're reading these polls, and I'm reading the polls saying the Democrats are 13 points up in the congressional generic, that Donald Trump has the lowest approval rating of any president at this point in his presidency in American history.
The next gen of Democrats is shifting further from the center, lurching left. Millennials and Gen Z now make up a large chunk of the electorate, and they've been seduced by third-wave feminism, brainwashed by critical race theory, and indoctrinated by anti-Western ideology. Enter David Hogg, a 25-year-old firebrand who's trying to make being super progressive on issues like gun control cool. He's loud, he's unapologetic, and he's divisive. But you know what? He's right on one thing. The DNC does need a rebrand.
Only 27% of our base is approving of where we are right now as a party. And we lost voting shares with every single demographic except predominantly older voters and highly educated voters. That is a huge problem. And what we're trying to do here is not just focus on primaries where there's potentially an older incumbent, but more than anything, an ineffective person in that position, and replace them with a generational leader to build the future of our party.
We covered David Hogg on this channel a few weeks back to map his ascent to party vice chair. At 25, he's the youngest of the DNC leadership by almost a decade. I'm not saying I agree with anything he stands for, but he has a point. Democrats can't ignore the fact that the party is fractured. One half is stuck in the past, the other half, radical progressives, are vying for leadership roles. Millennials and Gen Z are voting in numbers that scare the old guard, and they want a party that matches their values. They want real change, not watered down compromises or campaign promises. That being said, I don't want that real change because I know that real change is going to be, like climate alarmism and other extreme ideas. But nonetheless, before we get to the Carville-Hogg showdown, let's talk about Hogg's recent shenanigans at the DNC. The New York Post reported 2 weeks into his tenure, Hogg has been leveraging DNC contact lists to blast out messages soliciting donations to his own political action committee, from which he draws more than $100,000 in compensation a year, according to Federal Election Commission records. The PAC is called Leaders We Deserve, and Hogg is the president, clearly trying to be a leader we deserve. He is not. He's trying to interfere in primaries in deep blue districts as part of a $20 million effort to elect people he wants to run the party in the future. He sent out one of those fundraising texts using his new promotion for clout, but linking his PAC for donations instead of the DNC. Shameless. While this isn't technically illegal, it's pretty sleazy. James Carville, had this to say about it.
Yeah,
I
he's
think,
vice.
let me be very specific. I think it is abominable that an official of a political party who is being paid or supported by that political party to go out and raise money to defeat members of the same party. I think that's a jackassery of the highest level.
James, can you tell
And
me
if
what
you
ICSS
want to, if you want to beat Republicans, of which of course lefties never do, they never even run against them. That's one thing. I'm not into beating Democrats. I'm into beating Republicans.
A few weeks prior, the DNC gave David Hogg an ultimatum. According to the New York Times, at a private meeting in April, DNC Chair Ken Martin circulated a neutrality policy asking the party's top officers to refrain from any activity that would call into question their impartiality and even-handedness. Everyone signed it, except David Hogg. Martin told reporters that Hogg, quote, can't be both the referee and also the player at the same time. James Carville called him out for it too.
You have to understand the nuance here.
There's no nuance to it. It's just flat out wrong. It's
And
flat out wrong
you're
to use money
entitled
that
to
we
have
could
that
be
opinion.
used to
But
beat
here's
other
here's the deal,
Republicans.
James. What is your plan to deal with our abominable approval rating?
Win elections. You see, against Republicans.
Let
me finish, okay? Let me finish. You are my strategy. It is to win elections. It's not to win an election in Queens, okay, which you don't ever run against a Republican. It is to help Democrats win elections.
Perhaps for the first time, David Hogg is learning how politics actually works. Hogg said of his efforts, quote, what we're saying is we need to make room for a new generation to step up and help make sure that we have the people that are most acutely impacted by a lot of the issues that we are legislating on that are actually going to live to see the consequences of this. This is the most Gen Z sentence I've ever heard in my life. The run-ons, like, you could have made that 4 sentences. Do I find myself agreeing with him, though? I mean, out of the 6 oldest members of the House, 5 of them are Democrats, all over age 83. Remember Dianne Feinstein? She cracked 90 while still being wheeled into the Senate chamber by Nancy Pelosi's daughter, for the record, to cast her votes. Biden was so senile that he was basically held up on stilts by his party for the last couple of years of his term until his cognitive decline was exposed for the world to see at that infamous debate. So let's be real. When met with bills on AI, deepfakes, self-driving cars, any modern technology, these senators and lawmakers don't have the same skin in the game as, say, AOC. But let us know what you think in the comments below. Carville, on the other hand, disagrees that someone as radical as AOC could actually win a national election. He's right. He's been around the block. Listen to James Carville.
Well, it does seem like the party enthusiasm right now is behind Bernie and AOC. Like they're the ones drawing the huge crowds.
Okay, they never. I'm just the progressive left never beats. That Bernie ran for president twice. He lost twice. They had the most progressive group of candidates you ever had in 2020. They all got beat terribly, and it wasn't rigged. People voted how they voted. It wouldn't matter what somebody did. Just how many times do people have to say, this is not what we're looking for?
But here's what I can't quite make sense of, okay? Just a few hours after the debate was uploaded, James Carville released this almost cryptic tweet where he appears to have a 180 change of heart on David Hogg. He said, just called David Hogg. He reminded me of the story of, after the Battle of Shiloh, Henry Halleck urged President Lincoln to fire Ulysses Grant. Lincoln said, I can't fire him. This man fights. David Hogg fights. The DNC needs him. What's clear is this. The Democratic Party is in severe disarray. If the infighting were behind closed doors, that'd be one thing. However, it's the age of social media, so it's all on display. But here's the other kicker of the Hogg hunt, as they're calling it. David Hogg could be ousted from the DNC because he's a white male. From Semaphore, the DNC's Credentials Committee will meet virtually on May 12th to consider the challenge from Callan Free, a Native American attorney and party activist who lost a vice chair spot to Hogg in February. Apparently, after several rounds of voting, the race for DNC leadership came down to 5 candidates, 2 men and 3 women. Malcolm Kenyatta and David Hogg won the open spots. Free argued that she lost a fatally flawed election that violated the DNC charter and discriminated against 3 women of color candidates. She asked for 2 new vice chair elections. By aggregating votes across ballots and failing to distinguish between gender categories in a meaningful way, The DNC's process violated its own charter and bylaws, undermining both fairness and gender diversity, argued Free, a citizen of the Choctaw Nation. National Review's Jeff Blair put it best. Could any story better epitomize the current state of the Democratic Party, currently sporting a 25-75 approval rating even while Trump makes chaos out of the economy, than their inability to even revolt against themselves successfully, than the use of woke representation to suppress the only true woke radical within their official ranks? In a nutshell, the Democrats are mediocre even at purging themselves. While it's true that there are dinosaurs in the Democratic Party, it's getting really old. It turned out to be a major liability for the Democrats this time around with the last-minute coup d'etat of Kamala Harris after Biden fell apart on the debate stage. However, there are lessons to be learned from James Carville with his experience with Obama, with Bill Clinton. And he and the new guard of the Democratic Party have to somehow coexist together, and folks like David Hogg should be taking the pointers from James Carville and those campaigns and figuring out how to incorporate them for the modern era of the Democratic Party. This is what I would do if I was a Democrat, but I hope they don't take my advice. Speaking of the moderate middle that the Democratic Party, per James Carville's recommendation, would be wise to gravitate towards, Dave Portnoy, CEO of Barstool Sports, has been talking some sense lately on the Israel-Palestine conflict. He waded in a very unexpected way. For more on that, click here.